Hey, Jim, great to have you here. And thanks for doing this interview and congrats on the new book.
Oh, my pleasure. Great to be with you, Chris, as always.
So, I've known you for a while now, Jim. We're both mountaineers and
Yep.
we do a lot of other things outside of mountaineering as well. But, I've come to view you in our relationship in a way that I look to you for a lot of advice on mountaineering because
Thanks.
I've been doing this a long time, but you've been doing a lot longer than I have. And so, when I think of Jim Davidson, I think, man, that guy has been around, knows his stuff. What's your
Thanks.
take on where we've been the last 12 months with mountaineering shut down and everything else, and a lot of dreams put on hold right now?
Yeah, it's been a tough year for everybody all the way around. I thought the mountaineering and the outdoor rec industry stepped up really well early on. Sort of about month two, people were, politely peer pressuring each other. Hey, don't go do your climbing dream right now. Don't ski that couloir right now, because if you get hurt, you're going to tie up emergency response resources that are needed elsewhere. And for goodness sakes, you'll be tying up a bed that could save somebody's life. So I applaud the community for that. We all realize that we want to do our fun stuff, but now's not the time to be taking risks for ourselves and our community. So I thought that was good. It was great to see people turn to the outdoors and hiking in the local parks and everything. More of us created some more problems with crowding and politeness and stepping off muddy trails and onto plants. So I think we could probably do a better job there, educating the new folks who hadn't been out before. And I think that's so. I think we've done a good job in the outdoor rec community. But I think it brought forward. We need to really make sure we're taking care of our trailheads, teaching the new people our wilderness leave no trace ethic. So there's room for improvement as always, but I think we've been doing good.
I've been getting a lot of requests from teams for weather, and so I know things are starting to tick back up. Things are starting to open up, as you know, and people are starting to plan out those big peaks: Denali,
Right.
Aconcagua, Nepal, Pakistan. This is where your experience is so valuable. Everest, Choyu, all of those peaks. If someone right now is just, this is where I look to you and I say, if you're a young climber coming up, maybe you've been climbing 14ers and you're ready to
Right.
venture out on that first big peak, what
Right.
would you say to someone like that right now?
Well, there's sort of two things there. One is we're coming out of the pandemic. And I look at the pandemic, what I used to say about storms. When you're on a mountain and there's a storm period and you're stuck in the tent for 1 day, 3 days, a week, who knows, you have to ask yourself, what do I want to be like when the storm clears? Because the storm is going to clear, however many days it'll be. So what should I be doing in the meantime? Not just sitting in the tent and complaining and not taking care of myself and maybe slipping into a little lack of enthusiasm and energy, but taking care of my gear, eating the right stuff, drinking the right stuff, being ready to go. So when that storm clears off, we're ready to come out of this tent and start climbing again. I think that's true in the big sense too. Excuse me. I think it's true in the big sense as well, which is, we've had a year off. So if you want to do those big peaks, you got to start training now to get yourself able to go back to the 14ers this summer or maybe something bigger by the fall. So it's easy to sit around and say, well, it's pandemic, I've gained some weight, but we need to get back onto our programs to be ready.
Well,
And
this is
so that's
something
what,
though that you went through yourself when you were, I remember because we went up and actually did a story together and you
yep.
were training. You're like, okay, this time when I go back to Everest, I'm going to cut, I don't know how many pounds of weight it was or whatever it
Yep.
was. You're going to cut your pack weight. I mean, those are the kind of things that you did.
Yeah, I took that time to reflect between the first Everest trip and the second one to say, how can I do better next time? And I think we can do that coming out of the pandemic. And the folks that want to step their game up, maybe they're doing their first 14er after hiking below tree line. Maybe they're going from 14ers on their first expedition, like you said. But it's time to do some self-reflection. Say, all right, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And what am I going to do about those weaknesses in this time ahead of me so that I'll be better able to step up to that level when we get there? I think it's an opportunity really, is to do a little self-reflection and then put whatever that action plan is into action to be ready.
I remember reading not only in your account, but I remember you telling me when the earthquake and you were in Camp 2 and the glacier was shaking. I think the one thing that stood out to me was, okay, this is an extreme situation, but it was like you were still willing to keep an open mind and accept others' expertise over maybe emotionally what you felt like at the time. You were still looking to other people and their expertise as to what do I do next. And that is not always easy to do, Jim, because you can become emotional and very you can get into that very narrow mindset of, well, I'm not going to do what I'm told because this is an emergency or whatever. But
Right.
tell me about that mindset. When you were there, you were looking to other people for their expertise.
Yeah, in a moment of crisis like that, you have to know what you do know and know what you don't know. And what you don't know, you have to be willing to abdicate to other people. And so, in that particular sense, the leaders were talking over the radios about who was safe in which camp and everything. And if they said, we're going to stay here, that's it, we're staying here. I'm not going to keep bugging them. I'm not going to press them to go down because they had the bigger perspective on what was going on over the entire mountain that had been rattled in that terrible 2015 quake. But I knew other things, which is I've got to take care of me and make sure my tent mate Bart takes care of himself. So we are going to stay hydrated. We're going to stay fed. We're going to keep our gear dry. We're going to be ready to dress and get out of here at a moment's notice. I'm going to keep my avalanche beacon on during the avalanche activity. And also I recognized, so I was willing to follow others, like you said, but also if there was a spot where I had some knowledge to step in, it's my obligation to the team to put that forward. So in that case, I was a geologist and I knew something about avalanches, something about aftershocks. So I took a little while to think about it and then brought a simple case to our leader about the aftershocks and the potential for more avalanches with those aftershocks. So that was one little piece where I maybe had more knowledge than everybody else because of my 20 years of geology. And it's my duty to put that forward to the leader, let her work it into the matrix, and then step back. So I think it comes down to knowing what you know, knowing what you don't know, recognize the other teammates' strengths, and step forward where you have to, and then be willing to follow, wholeheartedly where you need to as well.
I think that, just in my own personal opinion, having climbed over the years, I think in the beginning I like valued, okay, the physical aspects are much more important.
Right.
Now I think exactly what you said, it's more mental than anything else. You can only do so much physically, and then it's all about their mindset. It's about, like you said, it's about where can I contribute and where do I have to step back and accept the expertise of others. Talk about that mentality as a mountain climber, the mental aspect of being stuck in a tent for days and waiting on the weather windows, and talk to me about that.
Yeah, in the book, The Next Everest, I talked a lot about being stuck in the tent. I trained hard for the climb. We were done all our rotations up and down the mountain. We're ready to go. And we were going to rest for 3 days. And we thought 3 days, maybe 4 or 5 at the most. Well, a storm came in and we rested for 3 days, 5 days, still bad weather, 7 days, 9 days, 10 days. 10 days of laying on the ice in our base camp tent on the glacier. Muscle is absolutely disappearing. I had lost about 15 or 18 pounds by then, almost all of it muscle. I'm sick of the food. It's day like 50. I'm away from home. I just wanted to get out of there. And that's when I realized that, there's a time to step forward and there's a time to follow. I'm kind of an energetic guy like you, and I valued that muscle, capability stuff early on. But I realized in this case, I can't force the weather to change. The weather's going to change when it's ready. So my job is to take care of me and my teammates and stay calm. Be patient. So in this case, it wasn't pushing hard and being perseverant. It was being patient so that I could be perseverant. If I wait long enough, this storm will lift and we will get our chance to go for the summit. So that was a big learning for me. And again, it's kind of knowing what you know and knowing what you don't, knowing when you can push and be actively perseverant by never stopping, but also recognizing when you need to be patient and just sit in the tent and wait for the avalanche conditions to get better and wait for the storm to go away. And then we will try for the top. And as you say, that's not always easy when you're a young person, you're gung-ho. But as you get to be an older mountaineer like me and you, especially me with the gray beard here, you realize the value in that both for success and for safety.
That's the thing. It's like, man, I'm always on the sort of the one giving the forecast, and sometimes on the receiving end, I just find it hard to wait out the weather windows sometimes. But I remember actually when you were down there with IMG. And it was funny, like I could see the windows coming. I was telling some teams about them. And I remember Alan Arnett, one of our friends, our mutual friends, saying, Alan, Jim may not be the best waiter he may be impatient right now. Do you remember those moments when you were just waiting on that weather?
Oh, yeah. Alan was one of the people I talked to and on the phone and others through messages. I was just losing it. Like it was about day 9 or 10 of that 11-day wait in base camp. And I was like, said to Alan, I'm like, I don't want to go up there. I'm ready to walk out right now. I don't even want my tent and sleep bag. I'm just going to walk out of camp like someone exiting a movie theater. And he was like, what, you? But that's a reflection of how overwhelmed I was with the waiting and how tired and sick of being there and all those things. But that's where that Zen comes in that I struggle with. And he was right. I'm not the best person on patience, but Everest really taught me that lesson, which is because I sat there for 11 days, we got not only a workable weather window, we got a great weather window, and we were able to summit on a beautiful morning, but we had to wait those 11 days. And that takes patience and wisdom and tolerance and all those things. And expeditioning will teach you that. Sometimes we learn those lessons the hard way when we don't get up that peak, or we try and push it in bad weather and get turned around. And sometimes we can open our eyes and try and apply them more proactively.
So, to get set up, to get in that position, I mean, it's so much work, as you know, the time, the money, everything else. And when you're up on the mountain doing the rotations to get acclimatized,
Yep.
if you're, talk to me, if you're an up and coming climber, how important nutrition is, how important following directions and instructions and doing everything to a T, how important are all of those steps?
Yeah, they're getting fit and dealing with altitude. They're kind of a similar pattern, which is, we talk about adding more workload on, letting your body adapt, resting during that adaptation period. If I can do 10 pull-ups, I may work up to it and then take a rest day and then get back at my pyramid again. There's all different approaches, but the idea is you're gently pushing yourself beyond what you did before, giving yourself a little rest, let those muscles grow, or in the case of acclimatization, those red blood cells grow, and then you push yourself to that level and a little bit higher. Over and over again, we go up and down and up and down and up and down, whether it's in our fitness or in the acclimatization. And so as a result, that first time you try and do a pull-up, the fact that you couldn't do one doesn't matter. Your first 12,000 footer gave you a big headache, that's fine. You learn something new, you'll be better adapted next time around. And it's a long journey of working your way through all that. And if you put in the work and you have good nutrition as you go and good rest, you'll be amazed in 1 month on a mountain or 1 year later where you can get to. You got to have a plan. You got to have consistency. You got to be willing to adapt a little bit when you get hurt or your life gets busy and you don't get the long run in this weekend. But if you are relentless about it and keep working the plan, you will be in an amazing spot in 1 month on Everest or in a year of training.
How important is it, to kind of work up to something like Everest? I mean, you hear stories of people going, straight from climbing some small peak to straight to Everest, or, how important, what, in your opinion, because you've worked up through different peaks, did you really find it valuable to do something like Cho-Yu before Everest?
Immensely valuable. Yeah, I mean, I'm a geologist by training, so I kind of take a scientific approach to things. And when I was reading my first Everest books 30, 40 years ago and going, wow, how do these people do these 29,000 footers? And they talk about doing a 26,000 footer. And they talk about doing a whole bunch of 20,000 footers. How do they get there? So I kind of backwards engineered it. I said, well, if I'm going to go to 29,000 feet, hopefully, I really ought to get some other 8,000 meter peak in. Maybe that's Cho-Yu. But I've never even done anything like that. Well, maybe I should get a couple of 20,000 footers in so that I have a kind of a broad base of experience, a pyramid. Well, that means I ought to be doing a boatload of 14ers, but 14ers in the summer are kind of easy with my shorts and my t-shirt. Maybe I should learn to do them how to do them in the winter. And if I'm going to do them in the winter, maybe I should do a whole lot of them in the summer so I know the trails and the way down so I don't get lost in the winter. So I kind of reverse engineered this big, broad pyramid. And I'm a believer in that big, broad pyramid for your skills, but also for your judgment of the mountain and your judgment of yourself. Because if you kind of do that pyramid of experience and you do 30 14ers and 15 of them in the winter and 2 20,000 footers and 1 26,000 footer, somewhere along the way, you're going to have to do that when you didn't sleep, when a storm comes, when you run out of food, when your partner's weak, when you're weak, when your left foot hurts. All of those things are going to happen inside that pyramid. So when you get to 20,000 feet or 29,000 feet, and 5 of those variables are going on at once, you've been there before. And it's when you get up high on Everest, there's no more room for errors. There's almost nothing in your pack except oxygen and 1 quart of water. You can't put on more clothes because there are none to wear. You can't eat food because you're going so fast. And so you have to be able to deal with lack of sleep, under nutrition, marginal water, backup gloves, and that's it. So you kind of want to get all those variables in as you go through the years. So when your moment comes on your first 14er, on your first 8,000 meter peak, you'll have all that under your belt.
just for me personally, dovetailing on what you said, it was like, I'd been climbing. I remember this was years ago, climbing 14ers for a long time. And it wasn't really until I, went up to 18, 20,000 that you really, tell me if you found this to be the case. You really have to find out whether you can do high altitudes or not, how your body's going to respond.
Yeah, there's some of us that have a genetic, well, not us. There are some people who have a genetic gift at altitude, and there's other people that have to work real hard at it, like me. I am not super fast at altitude at all, but it's hard to make me quit. And I figured that out about myself, that I may not, I know I won't be the fastest acclimatizer. And how did I learn that? I learned it the hard way on my first high altitude trip or two. But I know that in my case, by my third day at altitude, I'm going to be doing pretty good. But the first day, if you saw me at altitude, a new altitude for the first day, you go, oh boy, Jim doesn't look good. And I was worried the first time or two that happened. Now I know myself because I've been around that block a few times. So yeah, it's really rough going up to that next set of altitudes, and you have to learn it the hard way. Your body adapts, your brain adapts, and your attitude adapts. And you need all that because, literally at each camp on Everest, camps 1, 2, 3, and 4, I felt terrible the first time I walked into every one of those camps. But by my third rotation up the mountain, I had been at camp 1 3 times, camp 2 2 or 3 times, camp 3 twice. They got so much easier, like literally 25% faster than the previous trip. And so you got to pay your dues, and you got to force your body to acclimatize. And knowing that about yourself lets you play the long game strategically. For instance, in my case, first day at altitude, I'm going to be terrible. But by the third day, just you watch. That kind of thing. And it takes just experience to find that out about yourself.
I totally agree. I had no idea until you go up. You just don't know. I mean, um, so tell me, what was it when obviously you went back and you summited Everest. I remember it. I remember it was great. Um,
Thanks.
in your opinion, what do you think were some of the reasons for your success in that return trip? In other words, when you were preparing to go back, and you said, okay, I've got to do A, B, the roadmap essentially.
Right.
When you think back, what were some of the bigger reasons you think that contributed to that success, Jim?
Uh, because of the struggles on prior climbs, a bit like we were talking about before. On my first trip to Everest in 2015, I only got up to Camp 1 when the earthquake struck on April 25th of 2015 and drove us off the mountain. So I only got to Camp 1, 19,700 feet. I'd been to that elevation 24 times before. But I found that I wasn't as fast and strong in the ice fall as I wanted to be. And so that was in my head. I was like, wow, that was a really tough trip through the ice fall because it's steep technical terrain. It is the most dangerous spot on the mountain to be in the Khumbu ice fall. So you're trying to literally go as fast as you can for 6 hours. So I knew that I needed to work on my aerobic and anaerobic capacity to get ready for that. And I used that tough experience from that 2015 ice fall trip during my training in 2016 and 2017 to do more laps. On my last laps of sprinting uphill when I couldn't go any faster, I would imagine myself being in the ice fall and an avalanche happening. And I would find the energy to get one more charging lap up that hill. So I would use the past not so pleasant memories of suffering in the ice fall to drive my training. And I also would do a lot more visualization of like, what's it going to feel like? What's it going to look like? So that drove my training in 2017. I also knew that the suffering was going to be there, so I came more prepared to suffer. And I set myself some boundaries about what I was willing to endure. Like someone says, well, what if you're going to the summit and you just can't make it? Your ankle's bad, you're sick, your teammate's sick, whatever it is, you're not going to summit. Are you just going to turn around? And I actually talked to Alan about this. Alan asked me about this in another interview, and I said, absolutely not. I said, as long as it's still safe, even if I know with 100% certainty I'm not going to summit, this is the highest I'm ever going to go in my life. I want to see the the sun rise from as high on the mountain as possible. I am going to go till the sun rises, no matter what. And then I will turn around for safety's sake. So I kind of had some rules for myself for expectation for behaviors and performance before I went. And that helped guide me and sort of coach me along during the times I felt miserable or things weren't going so smooth.
This is what really interests me, is that mental aspect, those little mental tricks, that one you talked about. It's just somehow you've got to find the motivation, right? I mean,
Yep.
that's if anybody's ever camped, and the hardest part in the morning is getting out of your sleeping bag. I mean,
Right,
it's like
exactly.
you have to figure out that mental trick. I mean, is that something you've perfected over the years? Do you have little things that you pull out from time to time to really get you through that?
Absolutely. And they differ for everybody. I'll tell you mine. Number one, I bring a clean set of polypro top and underwear, and I don't wear them the whole expedition until the summit push. And I make a religious, flamboyant moment, and I pull them out of their bag and look at that crisp seam right there. I'm going to climb beautifully in this thing. There's one. As I shared in my book, The Next Everest, I also brought notes with me that my wife gave me, one for my daughter, my son, and for my wife. And I brought them with me, and those were my magic bullets. And when I had my most scared or most down times, I pulled one out and I played my cards very carefully. So I kept those in my back pocket. And I know that I may be having a rough day today and tomorrow may be rougher, but I've got this letter here from my son or my daughter or my wife, and I will pull this out when the time comes. The other thing is just even key foods. You know, you bring your, I have my little bag of summit foods. I pre-pack it before I go because I know what works best for me at altitude. I've got that baby pre-packed, and it's practically sealed in wax, so nobody can open it but me, right? And these are all just little silly psychological things, but they help. I had a little bag of amulets, a certain necklace my wife gave me that I wear that reminds me of strength from her and others. All of those things are like kind of touchstones to recharge me. And I go, yeah, this day's tough, but I've got that clean set of Polypro, and I'm going to open that letter, and I'm going to be ready tomorrow morning. And you just kind of psych yourself up for the big game, whatever little quirks work for you.
Yeah, I totally agree. We've all got those little things. And you had mentioned it just now, a minute ago, when you said, you know, the summit is important, but ultimately, I remember you telling me this. It was that view, maybe 200 feet from the summit, that ridge line, that final ridge line that you were really looking forward to with the sun coming up. And tell me that feeling. Tell me what that was like.
Yeah. So I've been a mountaineer for 35 years at that point in 2017, and done all these things we talked about to get ready, and had the setbacks of difficult things in the mountains that happened in years past, and the earthquake, the struggle to go back, and finally we're there. And I don't remember exactly, but I think on the summit push, it was about day 60 of the expedition at that point. I'd lost at this point probably about 20 pounds. And when you get to that high altitude above 26,000 feet, it's called the death zone. And it's not called the death zone because some of us might die soon. It's called the death zone because everybody is going to die in a couple of days if we don't get out of here, bottled oxygen or not. So the stakes are just totally as high as they can be. And you climb through the night, and somewhere around 3 o'clock in the morning, I go over the south summit of Everest, a false summit at 28,800 feet. Still got another 200 or 300 vertical feet to go. Closing in that last couple hundred yards. It was truly magical. I mean, you're moving incredibly slow motion. I mean, we're climbing at 300 feet, 350 feet an hour, which is 1/5 the rate that I can climb 14ers down here. And I think 1/25 the rate that you can climb 14ers, Chris. I mean, I'm moving in slow motion, but it's good in a way because it allows you to be careful, allows you to soak up this incredible view, start seeing the sun coming up over the eastern plains of Tibet. First, just a little dark blue, and then a little pink, and then a little orange. And then I began to notice that the stars were disappearing, and I turned my head and I went like this, and my headlamp wasn't doing much on the ground anymore. And I thought, are my batteries getting low? No, it's getting so light out that I don't need the headlamp anymore. And it was just kind of like this slow building music in my head. And I really think the last 200 yards to reach the summit were better than actually getting to the summit itself, because I had a chance to absorb that slowing and what it meant that I didn't quit on all those setbacks through the years, that hopefully I did my best, and I carried the honor forward of all the people that had taught me things and helped me get that far. And to me, it just felt like kind of a coming back circle moment to honor the things that they had taught me, and be very thankful and feeling very humbled to be so high on such a big mountain.
That's such a good story. I love that one. Every time you picture that sunrise, it's such a powerful thing up at those altitudes. And, you know, unfortunately, you mentioned the death zone, and you've been involved in rescues through your career. That's something you detail, actually. And you know, that feeling that hits you. Tell me about the feeling when you realize, okay, my plan just changed. Like I've got to do this, you know, morally. I mean, this is what I have to do. Tell me about that.
Yeah, like you said, I've been on a couple of rescues for sure, and I know a lot of people help in the backcountry, and that's really what I'm trying to do. I'm not on a formal search and rescue. Just when an incident happens to somebody in my team or even strangers nearby, and you see somebody, they're in need. I mean, that's someone's son, that's someone's daughter, that's someone's spouse. You got to help them out, man. It's way more important than the summit. And so, in my book, The Next Everest, I shared when we were on Denali with our mutual friend Rodney Lay. and my buddy Terry, and we were up high going to the summit. We were 2 hours from the top, and we came upon this sick person, and we gave up the summit attempt to Denali to help get this person off the mountain. And it was quite an epic because we're at 19,200 feet on Denali. It was brutally cold. Was I a little disappointed right then that I missed the summit? Yeah, sure. But that was another 2 hours of snowy climbing, and I've done a lot of snowy climbing. I don't think those 2 hours were going to change anybody's life or teach me all that much. And it would have been nice to stand on the summit, but I've stood on other summits too. And those things weren't important, but we were able to help save somebody's son, somebody's brother. And that's still a good feeling that I carry to this day. And the person's mom stays in touch with me, and even though it's been decades. So yeah, you've got to help out where you can. I think it's just a pure human thing to do. I think as wilderness travelers, we share an extra responsibility to each other. I'll take care of you if you need it. Hopefully you'll take care of me if I need it. So it's kind of a karmic give and take. And also, if you've been a wilderness traveler for a long time, you've probably been around some tough things. You need to bring those skills to bear. It's kind of like we were talking at the beginning of this conversation about knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know. And if you look at a situation and say, that person's sick, I know how to treat them, I've got this summit calling me, you've got to play to your highest level. And your highest calling right now is to help that person fix the injury, get them down the hill, whatever it is. And that's playing to your highest calling. Summits come and go. They're fleeting, joyful moments, but they're just the cherry on top of the cake. It's taking care of each other in the backcountry and in daily life, as we've seen during this pandemic. Taking turns lifting each other up, that's really the highest calling for us, I think.
So how important are teammates? Because you may have to save one, and they may have to save you. I mean, you've had some long time climbing partners like Rodney Lay, for example, that you've known for years. How important are, establishing those relationships and knowing who you're climbing with?
Well, I think it's critically important. I mean, sometimes it's fun to meet somebody new and say, hey, let's hike up Beardstad or something like that together. And that's fine because the risk is very low. And I think it's wise to use those kind of easy trips to get to know somebody new and say, man, we had a great trip together. Maybe let's try something harder. Let's try longs next time and ramp it up. I incredibly value the long-term friendships and partnerships I've got with people. I've been climbing with some people for 20, 25 years at this point. And you get to know each other's strengths, weaknesses, rhythms. I share in the book several times I was with Rodney and we couldn't hear or see each other. We still know how to communicate with very few words. I called Rodney from Everest during the earthquake in 2015, and Alan as well, because they know me so well. It was so scary with the avalanches coming down and our route back down through the icefall was busted up. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't missing something and that I was just thinking clearly and seeing the problem clearly. And they instinctively knew that. They said, yes, I agree. I don't hear you saying this. You're thinking about that. Those are the right things to think about. So I use them as a sounding board because they know me so well and they know what my capabilities are and my weaknesses as well. So they act as a sounding board and a reality check for me when I'm high on a mountain and I can't think anymore and I can't be sure what to do. And towards the end of the book, The Next Everest, I shared when I was descending from the summit. So I've come down from 29,000 feet, heading down towards Camp 2 at 21,000 and change. At that point, I had been up for about 34 hours, and I had been on the move for 24 of those 34 hours. They say that on summit day, you burn about 10,000 to 12,000 calories. I probably ate less than 1,000. So you're literally losing several pounds of fat and muscle. And I was going down the Lhotse face, and it's one of the steepest, iciest parts of the mountain. It's about 45 degrees, and you're going straight down these lines, and they go down for like 2,500 feet. And I had a camera problem on the summit, so I was kind of spaced out. It's, hour 34, and I'm awake. My brain's drifting away. My partners came through to my head and my heart where I was like, oh, I hope I get those photos back. I'm all worried about my camera and that chip and everything. And I saw Rodney and Alan in my head and they're saying, what are you doing? You're in the middle of the Lhotse face with a 2,500 foot drop, slap, wake up, pay attention. So they kind of brought me back. They weren't even there and they were coaching and supporting me. And that's the beauty of developing long-term partnerships in the mountains and in life, that you can do that mutual counting on each other even when the chips are down, and even sometimes when the person isn't physically with you.
It's so true, isn't it? So tell me, Jim, what else you got going on? You got anything else planned? Or was Everest, was that the final thing for you as far as, the gigantic peaks?
Yeah, I started climbing little tiny bumps in Massachusetts 39 years ago and climbed up to these other peaks. And I'm probably in the part of the curve where I'll be heading down another few years. I'll be climbing little tiny bumps in Colorado or Massachusetts, wherever I am. So there's kind of a symmetry to that kind of thing. I'm still an active climber here in Rocky Mountain National Park and in Colorado. I found a rhythm for me that works. I've been married to the same lady for 31 plus years. I've got 2 grown children. So my pattern was I try to go on expedition about every other year. So Everest was 2017. In 2019, Rodney Lay and I went to Peru with his older sons and taught them a little bit about the expeditioning game. Everybody's been on hold for the last year. So here we are, 2021. I'm going to be for the next few months promoting the book and whatnot, doing presentations, doing my public speaking and whatnot. But towards the end of the summer, I want to do a family trip just to make up for lost vacations over the last year and a half. I'd love to go to Nepal with my family. That's part of the game that's kind of in the play right there, is to do that. But also definitely keep doing some higher expedition peaks with my friends. Maybe South America, maybe Mexico. I'm sure I'll go back to Nepal because it's a beautiful country and the people over there are so kind. I don't know if I'm going to do any more 8,000 meter peaks. I'm 58 going on 59. I think if I took it slow enough, it's possible. But there's a lot of other things I want to do. I'd love to go back to South America. I'd love to get back to Alaska. So I kind of pick my expeditions more on where my friends want to go and where it fits our lives at that point. Can you get 2 weeks off or can you get 4 weeks off? We adjust the plan because really the long-term partnership, like we talked about, your friends and partners help you make your dreams come true. And if someone says, I really want to go to Peru, well, maybe you can support them. And 5 years later, they'll help you get to Denali. So we kind of do a swing back and forth. Who wants to do what? And sometimes it's simple. Someone says, I really want to go on this trip. I'm like, all right, I'm in. Tell me what day we're leaving. I'll start training. And then later on, it'll come back the other way. So some blend of those, some family vacations, climbing here in Colorado, and probably some moderate altitude expedition peak before the year's out, hopefully.
Well, I got to say, I think the book is valuable. I really do. And I told you this.
Thanks.
I think that it's really the most value is sort of seeing how someone like yourself who's been doing this for a long time approaches different situations, approaches risk, approaches, disaster, approaches expertise with other people, be willing to back off and allow someone to come forward who knows what they're, has that expertise. And especially for young climbers, I think that there's a lot of value in your book, Jim. So I appreciate everything you've said. And thanks for joining me here today.
Oh, my pleasure. I mean, guys like you and I that have been around for a while, we want to pass that knowledge on to help other people stay safe, build their skills, and enjoy the mountains. And I'm happy to do that. So I thank you for having me here so we could share a few more lessons along the way.
Yeah. Thanks, Jim.
Take care, Chris.